As I mentioned, my name is Caroline West. I've worked in marketing for just about 35 years. And usually I've done a mixture of consumer marketing for corgi toys, remember Matchbox corgi toys, and I've also done industrial business-to-business marketing as well. Of the two, whilst it's fun, crawling around on the floor with small children, business to business for me is primarily where it's at. And through the course of my career, I ended up in enzymes, which I was sort of semi-qualified for in the sense that I had a science background, but my interest levels kind of grew exponentially as I became more involved in Biocatalysts, which is one of the sponsors today, and I ended up working for them on and off for about 27 years. As of 10 weeks ago, I retired. Now, I understand this concept is very difficult for you at the age in your career journey, but trust me, when you get there, you'll know, and it's very enjoyable. It's actually good. Right, let's crack on and look at marketing and what it's all about. I also do consultancy work, which is why it's coming up as my consultancy company. I do act as a company called Alchemdia. I primarily work on my own, but when I'm involved with doing projects on a sales basis, I've got a couple of people that I pull in to work with me. So for those of you that have been either within a university environment or have been doing PhDs or masters, wherever you're at, the interesting commercial, I'm sure, could be new, could be something that's been underpinning your sort of career plans to date. But very few people actually contemplate a career in marketing. It's kind of one of those things that if you were to go to a careers teacher in school, they would look at you blankly in the same way that if you wanted to do a career in sales, they would just discourage you horrendously, primarily because they don't know what it is, and also because it's something that people tend to come about through maybe, say, working in technical first, or maybe opening up through a business studies course at university. They find out that the marketing option is one that they thoroughly enjoy. So let's revisit and have a look at what it is and actually what the job physically looks like. What are you going to be doing on a daily basis? How will you be operating? And importantly for you, do you in this room have transferable skills that could place you well into this environment? So the definition of marketing, the good old Chartered Institute of Marketing, the bane of my life for 30 years. It's the management process responsible for identifying, anticipating and satisfying customer needs. And only the Chartered Institute of Marketing, responsible for communication, could come up with that, which tells you not a lot at all. But it basically says this: marketing isn't a job for one person in an organisation. Every person that works in an organisation is marketing on some level. It doesn't matter whether you're answering the phone, working in the warehouse. The moment you have customer interactions, the moment you are working in a lab on a new product, you are essentially working in marketing. And I think that's one of the key messages to take away, is that if you are working for a company whose values you enjoy and eschew, then essentially this could well be the career for you. There's two levels of it. And the interesting thing is that a little bit like your scientific careers, you can be expected to operate at a couple of different levels. In theory, your marketing director, if you're in a company of that size, is the top of the tree, and they will be responsible for the strategy. They will be saying, along with their fellow board members, this is the level, this is the plan. But the fact is, very few companies have this, really tiered level. So you're expected to flip every day. Some day you're working on strategy, some day you're working on tactics, and you are expected to flip between the two. That's the real world. On the right-hand side, you have the tactics. You have the actual 7 Ps of marketing. It used to be 4. Used to be 4 Ps when I started, and then it kind of wasn't quite enough, and then someone got a bit excited, and then in the end they stuck physical evidence on at the end, and I'll talk to you about that later. I think someone just wanted to add an extra P in, to be perfectly honest. So, the strategy. This is the high-level plan. This is the summary of where you want to take the business. If you want to expand into China and India and you're not there, if you want to saturate the products with new markets or take out a competitor, essentially this is the strategy. From this, essentially, all the other plans come. Once you've put that line in the sand, all the other sub-plans come from that. And they will be numerous. There will be a pricing plan and a product plan and a promotional plan. And if you are a big company, then you will be responsible for producing maybe half of one of those plans. If you're a small company, you get the whole lot. So it's a really all-purpose, really well-rounded role. In your strategy, you will use tools that you may or may not have come across. So we have a SWOT analysis, where essentially you basically divide your company up into like a grid system, and you say, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? And you have to be really ruthless here and be really honest. If you're really, really good at developing new products, but not really good at promoting them, then that's the area where you would pick that information up and you would focus on it. Opportunities and threats outside the organisation. The one we're all talking about at the moment, Brexit. The fact is, we don't know how Brexit's going to affect us, but it's meant that a lot of suppliers have taken the opportunity to raise prices of raw materials, chemicals, whatever, to the UK. It's just what people do. PESTLE, slightly different tool. PESTLE stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental. Yeah. And again, how is the political spectrum going to change Brexit again? Economies, it's a really interesting one. The pound-euro relationship, really key at the moment. Biocatalysts as a company is actually a dollar company, even though it's based in the UK, because so much of the business comes from the US and we buy raw material. So the net migration of currencies is around the dollar. Deal in the yen, deal in the euro, deal in sterling. But that's what we would classify ourselves as, which was comparatively rare for a company that's based in South East Wales. So the strategy is long term. The nice thing about the strategy is that unless something changes horrendously, then it'll stay the same for a few years. You may tweak it, you'll tweak the tactics underneath it, but the strategy will stay the same. Tactics, on the other hand, much, much more dynamic. Essentially, they can change, not on a daily basis, that would be daft, but in response to certain things happening. So certainly quarterly, 6-monthly, you could look at the tactics changing, which again keeps it interesting. You know, competitors cutting a price, competitors discontinuing a product that allows you, the opportunity to pick up customers that could go unsatisfied. That's the type of dynamics and tactics you're dealing with on a daily basis. Interestingly, for most marketing roles, you will be expected to flip between the two, this ability to look out 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years in some cases, and then actually come back into the day-to-day and know that if you're going to do a show in July in Chicago, then you need to be shipping the stand probably somewhere around the middle of June. It's that type of... So a flexible mind, an agile mind is really key. We'll look at an example on the next slide of some clear objectives. But I think the overriding message from this slide is that don't write marketing off as the fluffy option. It requires data analysis. It requires problem solving, lateral thinking, new market identification, the ability to add, subtract, multiply and divide. I'm not undermining the fact that every marketing department has a set of fluffy pencils and felt tips that we use ridiculously frequently, but the fact is that all these skills that you have from your science-based jobs are absolutely relevant for marketing type roles. So let's have a look at an example of a smart, measurable objective. If you have a marketing plan that says the aim is to grow the number of customers or to grow the number of new products, it's not going to get you anywhere. The fact is it needs to be bedded down in specifics. It needs to be born of common sense and analysis and data. So if we look at here, this is a good example. We're going to produce one new product every financial year. We're going to deliver £1 million of extra sales at 50% gross margin. And we're going to replace an existing product with one with better sustainable credentials. The interesting thing here is that you may well be involved in companies or in projects that says if you're going to launch one new product every year, you can't just have one new product coming through the system. So pharma companies, for example, if they're going to have this, they will have 100 products in R&D because the dropout rate is so high that probably of those 100, one will make it through to launch. Now you think of the size of back support that you've got to have 100 new products going through R&D and then into new product development. So that may seem like quite an easy option, one new product a year, simple. But the fact is behind that sits a whole process that we'll talk about a little bit more later. The other thing that we can look at is the cost of obtaining new customers is really expensive. If you think about you as consumers finding a new company, you find their website, you kind of look at them, you research the products, is it right for me? This whole journey now that we talk about customers going on. It is much cheaper to keep your existing customer base. Very few companies actually have as part of their strategy retaining existing customers, but it's really important. All you've got to do, and I use the term all lightly, all you've got to do is make sure that you don't upset them, that your product quality remains the same, that you don't put your prices through the roof to the point that you offend them and they go elsewhere, and basically look after them, and the chances is that they will stay. As consumers, both in the industrial world and us as general on the street consumers, we don't want to move necessarily. I don't know about how many of you click on Amazon as your go-to, site, and then think, I shouldn't be doing this. Should I be doing this? Should I be dealing with Amazon? And have that thought process. But the fact is, they make it incredibly easy. It's like the old days when you used to be able to order Dell computers online. It was one of the first companies where you used to just click through every option. You want that printer or that printer. You feed it through, and then in the box arrives the computer exactly as you wanted it. That was quite groundbreaking when it first came through. Now we don't even think about it. We can't customize something now. We're quite offended down to our trainers, and whatever. But it's quite interesting that this is all sort of relatively new. So again, the top one we would identify as a clear-cut objective and say, yes, I can really get behind that. The second one, equally as important, much cheaper and requiring a different set of disciplines, but nevertheless really, really key and very much part of the marketing role. What are we doing right? What makes our customers happy? What can we do to make them even happier? All these are thought processes that in a marketing role you will have on an almost daily basis. So what does day-to-day marketing look like? Well, the nice thing about it is there is a clear-cut career progression. So you can go in as a marketing assistant, you can move up then to a product manager where you'd be responsible for one product. In a couple of years you move up to a brand manager where you're responsible for a group of products. And then lots of things can happen. You can become a marketing manager, which tends to be a more of a generalist umbrella role, whether you have staff reporting to you, or you can go down the digital route, promotions route, pricing route. The specialisms then start to come through. I would be really surprised if sitting in this room was anybody who couldn't adapt to a marketing specialism. So if you're a numbers and a data person, you're looking at data analysis, market research, pricing. If you are creative, then again, you could be looking at promotions and advertising and websites. The interesting thing is the focus on social media. It very much depends on the type of company that you're working for. If you end up on a consumer type company, they do an awful lot on social media and Twitter and whatever. In our business to business area, not so much. It can be quite challenging to use those 140 characters in a constructive, useful way without sending out inane, basically banal stuff that bores the pants off anybody who reads it. So if you are interested in that area, again, don't be under the illusion that it's all Twitter and Instagram. Because in the real world, in the actual day-to-day stuff, it's not. It's got a role, but it's just not the be-all and end-all in industrial. A quick flick through the 7 Ps. Product obviously means product and services. Some of you will end up in service organisations, and they're equally valid and equally important. The key to having good products is knowing your customers. Knowing what they want, knowing what they need, sometimes even when they don't. That's if they come to you and say, I want X, brilliant, we like customers like that. If they come to you with a problem that needs solving, then it's a little bit more challenging. But the fact is if you solve it for them, they will stay with you a very long time because you're into partnership then. You're into sort of a more strategic relationship where you mutually need each other. It's deeper. The journey is longer, but when you get there, it's more satisfying on both sides. Product lifecycle management is really, really key. We all know those products in our store cupboards at home that have been there forever. Heinz baked beans, you know, the product life cycle to die for. They came and they stayed for another decade. And quite frankly, we're probably looking at a few more decades more. Very easy, the marketeer's dream. Not so easy are those products that come and take an awful long time to get to their pinnacle. You know, you keep plugging away. But the nice thing is when they are adopted, then again, they stay for a reasonable length of time. One of the key skills of the marketeer is knowing when to knock something on the head. And that's a really interesting one, because to do that with confidence, it's not just a case of declining sales. That's easy. If sales are going down, you just knock it on the head. But what happens if you reformulate, whether you stick the price up, where you do a new improved version? You know, all these are options and tools available to the marketeer in order to expand a product life cycle. I would say the same about product launch. It is still cheaper to literally can a new product the day before launch than it is to launch a product and have it fail within the first 18 months. And that, when you've worked on something for maybe 3, 5, 10 years, can be really, really difficult to do. But things change, markets change, and if you are not totally confident that your product is going to launch successfully, you really are better than pulling the plug. We've done it twice at Biocatalysts, and I have to say on the second one, I almost shed tears, because when you've worked something for 10 years, literally in R&D, and you've seen all scientists work really hard, and you've worked, and then suddenly you realise that it's just taken us too long, and it's just not, you know, it's heartbreaking, but it was still the right thing to do. And you can kind of stand by that, as much as it still obviously grieves me now. On the right-hand side, we have pricing. Pricing is an interesting one. To price well is not to mimic the prices of your competitors. Equally, it is not to be drastically more expensive or cheaper. It's about finding the right price for that group of customers. If it's going to be more expensive, and there's nothing that says as a new entrant in a market, you can't be more expensive. Every time, Dyson brings something out, fans, hair dryers, it doesn't matter what it is, they are astronomical. And yet, how many people succumb to the Dyson hairdryer, the Dyson fan? Because the reputation is of quality and of customer service. But to do that, there has to be a whole back office of activity in terms of customer service, R&D, investment in new tooling kit to make these things, for them to allow them to charge those prices. The moment they have a bad run on product quality, that pricing differential will go. And they have been really, really successful in the sense that they have had no real major product quality issues, since they've been bringing consumer products out, which is quite interesting, because if you know what goes on behind the scenes in terms of supply chain, warehousing, agents, consumers dealing with these large chains, it's quite phenomenal, really. Anyone can offer fantastic customer service if you have an army of backroom people working in customer service, working in sales, working in the warehouse and production areas. The fact is that bottom statement of profit generation versus costs is really key. You can't price something at £9.99 and spend £11.50 servicing it. So there has to be a gap that says we produce it for £5, we sell it for £25, and that's the profit we make in between. This is where, again, the science of marketing really comes into it. You have to know the cost of things. As a marketing person in an organisation, you literally talk to every department, because when you're developing a new product, you have to know the cost of the box, the cost of the insert, the cost of the label, before you can even start to get into the realms of the actual cost of the product itself. Then you have to add in something for supporting it afterwards. And it's you can very easily watch what you think is going to be 60, 70% gross margin erode away as you pick the nicer box and pick the nicer exhibition stand at a show and make it bright and shiny, and suddenly all the time you're eroding into this to the point you have to pull back and say, actually, we can't have the nicer box, or if we do, then the price has to go up. So this dynamics all the time, this flexible thinking, this adaptability is really, really key. And you as scientists will have these as really good transferable skills, which is why it's potentially an area you could slot into really well. Place is an interesting one. Right product, right time, right place. Very easy if you're dealing with a company that basically, keeps it in stock and ships it out to you on an overnight. That's easy. When you're looking at things like agent and distributor networks, how do you as a company with a really strong brand entrust that to a third party who knows you, likes you, deals with you, but doesn't embody your values to the extent that you do? So you're now sending your product 5,000 miles and you're trusting a third party with it, and you're expecting to try and keep all the same controls of service and customer service and delivery times, but actually you're not, because you are having to geographical issues or cultural issues go through using an agent or distributor. So how you motivate those agents, how you manage them is really key. Ideally, if you have an agent or distributor, they should just be an extension of your arm. It should just be like reaching into the country and having your company there. But the fact is, agents don't deal with one company. They deal with 100 companies. And they have some companies that will incentivize them a lot, and some companies that have very short lead times, and other companies that just are sexier to deal with than enzymes and industrial products and chemicals. But the fact is, working on that relationship is really key, because that's what will maintain your brand image, your hard-won brand image in those countries. Very often delivery performance is used as a metric. Again, Biocatalysts is a good example. We used to use our delivery performance metric because it was better than the competition. But like all these things change, and they realised how important it was, and they upped their game. And you get to the point when you're at 99% on-time delivery, that there's really not that far you can go with it anymore. You could bridge that last 1%, but the fact is, coming back to the cost, it would be so expensive. You'd need to recruit so many people to be on it that the margin would go down and it would be not cost effective. So again, there's examples of everything interacts with everything else, very dynamic. Then we get into the e-commerce, mobile distribution and sales options. The moment you can order something online, the expectation is that it will arrive promptly and intact. And when it's a technical product, that can actually be quite difficult. I would be really surprised if any business would go through a technical company without you having to contact a technical person and have a conversation at some point. I don't know how many of you have worked on projects where you've had to talk directly to the customers. Our lab team are used to it. They are recruited in the knowledge that they will expect it to be customer facing. We don't expect them to do all the customer stuff. My God, they'd never be in the lab. But we do expect them to provide end of projects reports, and summaries, and to basically bullet in the customer that the project is on track and on plan at various points. Very underestimated place, very often slotted in as an afterthought, but as you can see, really important. Promotion is the one that you'll all be really, really confident with. Promotion is the one that says it's your website, it's your brochure, it's your business card, and it's your salespeople. But equally, it's not just your salespeople, it's people working in the warehouse, people working in customer service. Everybody that is customer facing on any level is promoting your brand. And it's an interesting one. In the days of social media, where you can go out on a Saturday night in Facebook and post things at 3 o'clock in the morning that on 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning don't quite seem so sensible, it's a risk. So having a policy that basically clarifies the line between work and social and media, and social media in work and social media personally is really key. No one's out to stop employees having fun at the weekends, but when they're posting pictures of themselves prone in a gutter at 4 in the morning and then not turning up to work on a Monday, you have to accept that questions will be asked. I'm sure none of you would be remotely guilty. Equally, promotion must gain attention, and it must be consistent. The key thing here is that people start their journey with you and they're with you for a period of time. People will always say, oh, let's update the website. It's all getting a bit boring. Let's spend some money updating the website. That's great. And if your website is looking tired and is not a reflection of your values or your products or the company, that's great. But actually, sometimes it's about just basically, looking at consistency, looking at letterheads, looking at the way people are writing emails. Sometimes it's far more subtle than just throwing money at the problem. And the key thing is that people shop around. We all shop around. We have more choice available to us now than we've ever had before. There are comparison sites whereby if you want to buy a new car or a new gas hob, whatever you want, you just key it in and it will bring all the products together and you can look at what's important, to you. So now actually, getting people to choose your product over someone else's is getting harder, not easier. The more information that's available in the public domain, the more discerning you get as consumers, and the more you are measuring people all the time, measuring these companies and measuring the interactions that you get. So we have to be on our A game. We have to be looking at how we're spending our money. I go back to the days when we used to allocate, an advertising spend, an actual physical, in a magazine, full page, half page, black and white colour. It was so exciting because you had money to spend. Now what we can do with a similar amount of money, and this is where the print guys, really have a difficult life, because now for the cost of a half page advert in a reasonably good journal, you can saturate Food Navigator in the US, the EU, you can have 3 hits with someone. All the time you're looking for this frequency, putting yourself in front of people the maximum amount of times. And then the reach, how far are you getting? Who's going to send that email on or that link on because they think it might be of interest to another colleague in an organisation? So actually, as much as marketing in essence has become easier, more avenues available to you, much more choice in what you can do. How you pick which website you advertise with, which medium you use, when and how is becoming increasingly more complicated, which is why, again, these specialists are starting to come through. These people who know not just digital marketing as an umbrella term, but the actual specifics. They will work purely in Google Analytics, purely in, small banner ads. They will actually specialise in that to make sure that, every penny works really hard. And these are really talented people who analyse an immense amount of data to help you make the right decisions. People, when you have staff in your organisation, you entrust them with both your corporate image and your brand image every day of the week. Every time a salesperson goes out on a visit, every time someone in customer service picks up the phone. The lovely thing about marketing is that you work with everyone within an organisation. So not only are you a customer of every other department is a customer of marketing. And actually within an organisation, that's a really great place to be, especially if you work in a company where it's reasonably big, and if you only worked sort of in a silo basis, you'd know very, very few people within the organisation. The chances are with marketing is you will get to know everyone really quickly because you'll be interacting with them on a regular basis. We find as well individual people are incredibly important. You can say they're not, you can say that it's the company, but actually very often it comes down to individual people. An individual salesperson will be memorable because they went that extra mile. Someone faxed out a certificate to Australia at the equivalent of 7 o'clock at night, their time. These things really count. And as much as they sound very trivial, when you're a customer and maybe you've got a food inspection the following day and you have to have all your documents lined up, the actions of that person 5,000, 8,000 miles away can be really, really important. And to do that, you've got to make sure that people fit the organisation. Every organisation has values in the same way that every person has values. If you have someone who doesn't have similar values to the organisation, they are not going to fit in. And we've all met those people. We've all met those people who seem to seamlessly fit into an organisation, that kind of just seem to get it. And then those that it's not quite so straightforward and they struggle. And it's because their values are different to the organisation that they're working for. Therefore, when you're recruiting and when you're going for interviews, you need to be asking about the culture of the organisation. You need to be asking about their views on, flexible working, about career progression, about, what's the really important thing to the organisation? Is it keeping customers happy, or is it just all about profit? Because if it's all about profit and you are a person that is about wider values than that, maybe you're about praise and recognition, then there's going to be a disconnect between you that probably isn't going to bode well. And I've noticed with interviewees coming through now, you do talk a lot more about the bigger picture, which is just great to hear. For you, it's not always just about the role. It's about the values of the organisation and the opportunities that affords you. And when you're in work, 40 years, and for you guys, it'll be, I'm dread to say, even longer. It's really important that you find a fit. That every day going to work is not miserable. That is not normal. And if anyone tells you it is, it's not. You have to enjoy work. You are there an awful long time. Physical evidence. When you are, the wanderer returns. And live from Chicago, a round of applause. And I've never been so relieved to see you in 30 years of marriage, I have to say. Physical evidence. When you are looking for a new product or new service, it's risky. It's risky because every time you don't choose Amazon or you don't choose Apple or whatever your personal predilection is, you are taking a risk. You are taking all that knowledge that you take about your existing suppliers and you're doing something different. So if you go and the website's a bit tacky and a bit outdated and it's all a bit grubby, you are not going to buy. In the same way that if you walked into the reception area of the company concerned and the plants are dying and the trophy that is their customer services award goes back to 1984, it's never going to impress you. And the digital area is exactly the same. You are walking into the shop front. Doesn't matter how you dress it up, that's exactly how it is. Some companies engage customers and ask for feedback. I don't know what you feel about this, but it's every time you shop now, and it drives me absolutely nuts. And it's now become a point of thing with me where I don't respond at all. Now, the sad thing is I've gone from responding to either exceptionally good service and exceptionally bad to now not responding to anything. And I think a lot of us are just very saturated with being canvas for our opinion. So again, if you genuinely want to know what your customers think, here's a novel idea, pick up the phone and ask them. Don't send them a survey. Don't ask them to put yet another smiley face in another smiley box and wing it back on an email. As a marketing person, you should be interested enough to pick up the phone and say, we did this project with you. Just give me, two goods, two bads. What could we have done better? If they are a true customer in the sense that they're looking at a strategic relationship with you, they don't have an issue with this. They don't want it every time. They don't want Friday at 4 o'clock to be the customer service phone call. It's all tacky and horrible. But they do like to be canvassed once a 6 months, once a year, or at least given an avenue where if they've got an issue, you can address it. That's the physical evidence. That's about saying we really, really want to know more about you and what you want and what you need from us so that we can go right back to that initial definition of marketing and say we want to anticipate your needs and we want to satisfy them. And yes, we need to make a profit because we're not a charity, so we're not going to lose sight of that. But if we can work together, it's going to make their lives a lot easier and it's going to make our lives a lot easier too. All of you in this room have transferable skills, all right? If you think that essentially you are scientists and therefore marketing is not relevant to you, hopefully we've disproved that. If you are a numbers person, then you have avenues available in market research, as I say, data analysis. And if you're thinking that, you can't possibly be creative, when you're working in the lab and you generate data and your manager says to you, okay, now what are we going to do with it? What can we do with it? They're asking you to think laterally. As I say, it comes back to thinking about problem solving, about thinking creatively. We've proved that X does Y. What can we do with it? If you can hand on heart tell me that you are never creative in that way, I don't believe you. Because I think inherent in all of you, in lab-based jobs, in science, in your associated areas, you are called upon to be creative. You might not want to admit to it because it's all a bit fluffy, but essentially that's what you're doing. You are using those transferable skills outside that you've gleaned over the years and being able to transfer them into an area totally different, but the disciplines are basically the same. And the sharing of technical knowledge. There are two avenues into, as Stuart will talk about in a minute, a sales type role. You can be a genuine salesperson who is, sales to the core, and then you have to learn an awful lot of technical information about a technical product. Or you can be a technical person that pops their head over the parapet and says, I think I can share this knowledge. I think I can explain it in a way that customers would understand. I think I could collect data from the customer, and analyse it and get to the root of the problem. So it's interesting that all the disciplines I've talked about, whether it's, new product development, whether it's about promotions, all of these are areas that you will have skills that are applicable in. And hopefully at some point in time you might decide to use them. Okay. There's a wide range of job variations. If you want to talk to me about any specifics with them, you can ask questions at the end. Your technical knowledge that you gain in the course of doing your PhDs or your projects that you're working on will give you a base technical knowledge that any commercial organisation in the same area will find useful. And the thing is, it's not just about social media. If you think marketing is just about Twitter and Facebook, think again. Because if you truly are interested in it, you can find a job in any area to use any of your transferable skills reasonably easily. Great. Thanks, guys. Is there any questions? No? Happy? Yeah, go on.
Maybe with respect to marketing itself.
Yeah.
So obviously, we are quite familiar with marketing in terms of consumer products.
Yeah.
Because we see it daily. Everything else. But when you do marketing in a B2B basis, how different is it in terms of the technique that you use and the avenue?
Yeah. I would say similar but different. So if you think about it in terms of if you're a scientist and you are charged with a product, you're working on a project and you have to look for a new raw material, then the chances are if your organisation doesn't have it, the first thing that you're going to do is hit Google. And so essentially the website for a B2B company is really, really important. It is unlikely that on your website you will include every single thing, but the fact is you have to have enough keywords in there to basically put yourself further up enough the search engine so that the scientist involved knows that actually probably having a conversation or dropping you an email is a good next step, so that you're not a total waste of time, but equally not 100% sure whether they can offer the total solution. Then it's things like availability of technical data, availability of a technical person for you to talk to if you want to. It's a lot more in business to business about people availability and about technical data availability than it is in a consumer product. If you think about looking for something, say for example, coming back to my felt pen fetish, online, you Google, you look at the list of products available, you just go through to the brief description and you decide which one for you. In a business-to-business scenario, there's not going to be enough data in those brief descriptions. So you're going to have to engage with someone either to explain the problem or for them to refer you on to the sales team so that they can actually have a really good in-depth conversation with you about what you physically need. And again, it's about the fact that you will be dealing with the organisation directly as opposed to maybe dealing through some sort of interface. And I think that's, again, really important. So the product is coming directly from the company. The people will be working directly for the company that you will be, interacting with. So it's a lot more about things like exhibitions, technical data, website, brochures, that type of sort of anything that sort of puts information out in the public domain as a first hook, if you like. But the fact is there's going to be far more people interactions, direct one-to-one people interactions than in the consumer world. Yeah.
Good place to hand over.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, good. With an element of relief, I give you Stuart West, just in from Chicago.
Just in from an exhibition.
Yes, absolutely.
Just going to move on.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. No, I'm going to just...
There we go. Got it. And that one should bring it on. Here we have. I'm sure you've all seen at least one of these films. You've heard the stories about the double glazing salespeople. these are obviously business to consumer selling, and you never hear, or almost never hear, any good words about salespeople that sell to consumers. It's all about inflating prices, ripping people off, doing shoddy work and getting out as soon as you can. The difference often here is that these do the sale and that's the end of the transaction, and they don't care if they ever see the person again. It's very short and it's a one-off. In business-to-business selling, so in the area we're in, so we sell specialty enzymes primarily to the food industry. The sales cycle to actually from first inquiry to getting sales is typically about 2 years. We've just closed off a really big one. It's taken 6 years. And during that time, you're building up a relationship the whole time. You're sending out samples, you're giving them technical information, and you build up trust. And if it goes wrong at any point, then you possibly lost 2 years of work. And at the end of it, it's not like these guys who go in and say, right, sign this purchase order. You never actually see the purchase order. It goes through their technical team, and they recommend, right now we're going to start buying. So it's not this type of selling. It's all about people relationships and building up trust. So this is what it's like. It's so if anybody likes sort of instant gratification, which is I want to get some success straight away, then this is not for you. It's there's a lot of disappointing roads, dead ends, but it's very rewarding, and in particular for building up relationships. You know, if you work in a lab in a project team, you've got a few people around you. Here you build up relationships all around the world. And so the key ones here, it's building relationships with multiple people, not just one person, and it's done over a long period. You have to be knowledgeable about the products and services, so that's technical knowledge. They don't expect everybody to be a super expert, so them asking a question and you saying, sorry, I don't know, I'll have to find out, that's perfectly fine. Every question they ask, saying, sorry, I'll have to find out, is not perfectly fine. And these words at the bottom, often again, you don't associate it with the sort of classic image of a salesperson. Professional, polite, and you'll notice asking questions and listening, not talking all the time. You won't get anywhere if you love talking in this, because it's all about listening to what the customer wants. And the more sort of familiar side, being dishonest, misleading customers, talking too much, because you'll never persuade them to buy in this area. It's a complex buy. You're not selling to one person, you're selling to many people in the company. And it's very rewarding. You will get higher pay in a technical sales job than if you ever stay in a lab. The reason for that is most science people are not very good at it, or don't want to do it, and therefore there's always a shortage. Wherever there's a shortage, the price is higher. It's very results driven. It's not a case of, oh, I've done the experiment 5 times, it didn't work. You know, you are being paid to win business. The winning the business pays your salary. So if you like working towards targets as opposed to often working in sort of vague areas, it's good. But you get to meet a lot of interesting people and make many long-term friends. So as I said, I've just come back from an exhibition in Chicago. I've been going over there many years, so many of the meetings were as much about the social side. How are you, what's going on, where's the children, and the occasional fun part of going to blues clubs. If you think in a lab, you might be involved in a couple of projects. But when you're in this area, every company that you're working with, is running 1 or maybe 2, 3 projects. So if you're working with 20 companies, that's 40, 60 projects. And you've got to keep a handle on all of them. You've got to be able to talk to the scientists about it. When they've got problems, it's find out about what's going wrong, how you can help them, which makes it incredibly varied. So although primarily we sell into the food industry, which of course itself is incredibly vast, we've also done projects with cosmetics companies, chemical companies, pharma companies, and so you're thrown in to a completely different sort of application area. Still enzymes is what we sell, but the technology of how they're being used is totally different. So you've got to be really flexible in your thinking and adjustable. But it also, if you like variety, you'll never get more variety than this. I mean, compared to working in a lab, it's huge. And depending on the area that you're covering, you travel the country, travel the world, and you see lots of places. So if you like travel, which is all paid for, it's good, but it's not totally glamorous. The downsides, you are out on your own. So when you're going to meet people, you're with them, obviously at the customer, but all the travel in between is on your own. So when you go back to the hotel at night, you're on your own. Because you're traveling out, not every week, but maybe every other week, it means you can't have weekly routines. So if you want to go to badminton club every week on the same night, you can't do this job. There's long days, weeks away, so it's not a case of start driving off at 9 o'clock to get to the first place at 12. You are expected to be to the first place at sort of 9:30, which means if it's a 3-hour drive, let's leave at 6:30, and then generally stay away and see others. There is a lot of time in hotels, cars and airports. The reason I'm late, the plane was late. So instead of having just under 2 hours in the airport, I had almost 5 hours in the airport. And that's boring, but it's if you know that's going to drive you mad, it's not for you. And but also the con, it is very results driven, which if that's not what you want to be, regularly tested on quite measurable things, then it's not for you. What I said. And tomorrow I'm doing a soft skills session, and we're going to be talking about personality profiles and behaviours. And you'll see when I go through that in general, scientists tend to fit in a self-personality group area, and that isn't usually the best. But it's not like often you see with the consumer selling, where you just got someone who talks all the time. That's not what's wanted here. But it's just a bit more sort of sociable, and being thrown into difficult situations and having to deal with them. The difficult situation can be stuck somewhere where no idea how to get out because the transport's all gone wrong, or you've prepared an hour's presentation for a company and they come in and say, sorry, a crisis here, can you just do a quick sort of summary of it in 15 minutes? So you haven't got any time to do this, you just have to do it on the spot. So if you like fast thinking, doing things that are very variable and like that, it's really good. So these are some of the things that you have to be, or you can't be. So I've mentioned about, dealing with lots and lots of different projects. So if you're curious and you like learning and doing lots of different things, then it's really good. You're meeting all these people who are in companies doing different things. They will talk about what they're doing. So if you're curious, you will learn a lot. But a key thing is the good listener. You're asking questions to learn and listen about what they want. And if you don't really listen very well, then it's not right. Long-term retention of scientific knowledge. You get asked a lot of questions. And so you've got to retain it. As I say, you're not expected to be able to answer every question, but you're expected to answer a lot. And some people seem to be able to learn a lot, and then within a couple of weeks they've forgotten it. then if that's you, this isn't for you. You need to be able to retain knowledge. And you are out on your own, so you've got to be self-motivated and driven. There's nobody getting you to get up and do things, you have to do it. Then, if going into a room, possibly with quite high up senior people who you've never met before, terrifies you, then it's not for you. If you're travelling somewhere and it all goes horribly wrong and you just panic, it's not for you. If you want routine in your life, it's not for you. Presenting, many people say that they would rather die than present in front of a large group. It's not for you. And some people can't bear not knowing an answer to something, but it's life. I mean, nobody, and particularly now when you think about, what is they reckon now, the amount of information produced in 3 to 4 years equals all the information produced before in the whole world. So when you start a degree, you know this, when you got to the end of it, there's that amount of information, you can't possibly know it all. But if you find it stressful not being a real expert, then it's not for you. We are going to go into this more tomorrow. Just to give you a quick, up there you've got your high extroverts in the top right hand corner, and down here you've got your sort of introverts who like nothing better maybe to sit in a lab in front of a computer and never talk to anybody all day. You clearly don't want those, and you don't want those. We've used this on all our salespeople, so we know roughly that actually where they sort of fit is sort of like in this area. So neither extrovert or introvert, but here. So this way is just too deep thinking, and certainly you don't want to go up there. But I'll talk about this much more tomorrow, about what these boxes and terms mean. It sounds very easy. And just one thing, answering a question from earlier. In business to business, there's probably 2 types of products, or maybe we go 2 types of products and a service. If you're going to buy bulk chemicals, you want to buy 10 tons of sodium hydroxide, you can just do that off companies' websites. Just go in and place an order. By the specification, it's what you want. So that is impersonal selling, so commodities. The technical side is when you're selling specialities, and that people don't exactly know what they want or if it's going to do the job they want. And also, you're talking to people in companies that are doing research, and obviously the research may not work. Someone's got an idea, I'm going to try this, it might not work. And so in theory, the more you do, the more activity you do, the better it should get. But again, this is where the sort of fast-thinking intelligence comes in, and having to say no. If someone comes to an idea, in a million years this is never going to work, but they're really enthusiastic about it. So you're just going to have to say, sorry, look, this isn't going to work, we can't help you here. Because if every idea that ever comes in you spend time on too much that's going nowhere, and then you never have any success. For those of you that play poker, obviously the one that wins, wins. But the one that folds first and knows it's a bad hand and they're not going to win will also usually win, because they don't throw away their money. So keeping lots of dead lost projects going is where the sort of technical commercial skill comes in. Coming back to behaviours, a bit of repeating something what I've said. But if you look at those and think, that's a bit like me. And sort of a last part which isn't there, which is they do say some people aren't really keen on other people. That's why they work on their own. You've got to like other people and deal with a variety of people. And in general, most people out in the world are nice people, they're friendly people, so it's not a case of having to go and think, oh my God, I've got to deal with these terrible people all the time. So you're dealing with nice people, and therefore you build up lots of friendships. If you do international sales, you go to lots of interesting places. Exhibition centres are always placed in nice cities. So that show that I've just done in Chicago, last year was in Las Vegas. The big European show we do, that's sometimes is in Paris. We were owned by, we had a shareholder for a while who was based in Munich. So when you go over and you have a business meeting, if it's the same time as the Oktoberfest, then in the evening that's where you go. So there's a nice social side to it. So whilst during the day you're often going to be on your own, in the evenings often you will go out with, particularly if you're doing exhibitions, you'll go out with your colleagues or the customers, and it's a very sociable place. And then, as I said, you're getting to see a lot of the world for free. Just some material. If anybody's interested in reading more about it, there's these books that can read. And what you'll find is, if you notice the term relationship selling, it's about building relationships. It's not about trying to persuade someone, buy this, so I get some money from you. And finally, whenever you go for an interview, you are selling yourself. And so if you're familiar with techniques, for example, first impressions really do count. If when you go into an interview, remember you're selling yourself. If you go in with your head down, you don't smile, you sort of, oh, do I shake your hand or what? From the moment you've walked into that building for an interview, you are being assessed, and so need to sell yourself. And so a lot of the sort of techniques that you learn in selling applies to selling yourself. So if you think one down here, if you're going to do a sales call, you try and know about the company before you go. If you're going to go for an interview, you should know about the company you're going to the interview before you go. And when you go and do a sales job, you've got to tell them about the services, the technical capabilities. When you go for an interview, you need to tell them about your technical capabilities, your knowledge. It's not people doing interviews haven't got ESP, they can't see what's inside your head. So you have to sell yourself, you have to talk to yourself. But also, in the same thing, I've mentioned it quite a few times about listening, the number of times in sales where the person doesn't answer the question they've been asked, but also if you're being interviewed and you're asked a question and you answer something completely different, you're sort of moving very fast down to not getting that job. So a lot of things, if you read these sales books about things to do, you will pick up quite a few tips which you can use in interviews to sell yourself. And it's not, and by selling yourself, I'm not suggesting you're making yourself something you're not. What you're doing is telling the person that's interviewing the useful things they need to know about you to decide if you're right for the job. And if you don't tell them, they can't know. So there are useful things in here that you could use for yourself. And the same with the CVs and things. That's like promotional literature. A bad CV, you're almost no chance. But also, and it does happen quite a bit. It's the same with promotional literature in a company. You do not put false information in. It's often usually quite easy to spot. Things do get checked. Maybe not in the first round, but before you ultimately get the job. And anybody that falsifies as a CV, it's just a no-go and you've lost the opportunity. And the same when you're doing promotional literature. It's about being truthful, honest, and not overhyping things, which is what you see a lot in some areas of business. Right, I've slightly overrun. I am here tonight, and I think there's a session for this later for people can meet. I have to add at the end, there should be in your pack something about biocatalysts. We have quite a few jobs going at the moment. You're going to hear this quite a bit. I think you probably heard it in the keynote speech this morning from Fujifilm Diosynth, how many jobs are around. It's a big growing area, industrial biotechnology. We've got quite a few jobs, and we're based just outside Cardiff, which is a lovely city if you don't know it. And if there's anything of those jobs that appeal, then you can just email in your CV to the email address given. So, any questions?
I have one. It might be a silly one, but why a person that has a PhD like in science and industrial biotechnology would be like a better fit than a person that has a background in economics for doing marketing or sales? Like, is the knowledge itself that we carry with us, or like the way we approach the problems? I don't know. It's just like my question, because if you apply for any of these jobs,
no, it's an interesting one. I think for a technical sales job, it's your base level of science that's really good. You won't come with a specialism of enzymology unless we are very fortunate. That we know we would snap you up in an instant. But it's that base level. It's the processing of knowledge. It's understanding complex technical data, the ability to sift and pull out, the relevant pieces of it. Now, that's not to say that an economist couldn't do it if it was the right sort of person. It comes back to this: if it's the right person, you can backfill the technical, or you can teach the sales. People don't come as a finished package. We just know our most successful salespeople that we have are technical people that have done a degree in, biology, chemistry, whatever, the range, and then decide that they want a career in sales. And then the spin selling that we talk about, this need identification isn't sales in its true sense. It's about listening and about relationship building. So it's not the photocopier, filing cabinet thing. It's about really getting to the nub of the problem, extracting the information out, deciding whether we can help, and then building a relationship. So.
If you're looking at take two extremes, someone, say, with a good science background and someone without it. What we found in general, with a very few exceptions, is the non-science people just don't pick up enough science to be able to have a good enough discussion. So there have been some exceptions, non-scientists who just amaze me at how fast they pick up knowledge, and that's clearly just the way their brain works. But most people aren't like that, and in fact, a lot of the other way. The moment they hear a technical word, they sort of like freeze. Oh, what does that mean? So we found just by experience, you can't take commercial people and teach them the science. It's better to find someone that's good at science with those sort of personality traits, and then just teach them the sales skills. That's the most successful way we found.
Are you doing like the Myers-Briggs test?
We have done Myers-Briggs before now. Belbin is slightly different than that Stuart will talk about tomorrow. Belbin is about roles in a team. Mm-hmm. So you'll have your ideas person, and then you'll have your completer finisher. And it's about making sure that no one person is everything, but that if you're going to be an ideas person, there's someone else who's a completer finisher that's going to literally take it off you and make sure that the product is delivered out to the door to the customer, allowing you to then go and get the next big, bright, shiny idea, And that's what it's all about. It's about looking for balance.
Yeah, there's lots of personality tests, and I'll talk about a few of them. I've done a Myers-Briggs, but it's not so useful for in business. It's not.
No, it's just for knowing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's I embarrassingly had my Myers-Briggs profile read out to me and thought, oh, I don't like them. But it's yours. So I was like, I don't like me. So it was really interesting that in that, that those traits that come through, interesting in a work, your work mask, if you like, as opposed to your sort of, your personal work.
No, I've done it myself, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. You read about yourself.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, that's true, actually.
Well, that's a better reaction. That's interesting to, I don't like that person. There we go. So I take interest in anything.
Yeah, but at the same time, maybe you don't like that person, like because you search something.
Yes, exactly,
others,
absolutely.
like,
But
like
effectively,
you are
what
that
they do.
person,
Yeah,
you are that
absolutely.
person,
Oh
so-
yeah, and that's my role in that too.
Right. So I think you have